Hi everyone! Today I'm going to teach you how to make sauerkraut. I've been making sauerkraut for the last few years, and this is an extra special episode because it's made with cabbage from my own personal garden. So let's jump right into it. You want to pick the best ingredients possible when you're making anything. Here, I was able to grow my own cabbage and use it for this recipe. So I am extra excited to share my sauerkraut recipe with you. We're going to be making a regular sauerkraut with green cabbage, a regular sauerkraut with red cabbage, and a spicy jalapeno sauerkraut that's one of my big favorites. Now, my cabbages here have these outer leaves that I've peeled off to prepare for the sauerkraut. We're not going to be using these outer leaves for the sauerkraut, but you can save them if you happen to get cabbage like this and slice them up and use them in a stir fry, which is what I did with them. They are good. No part of the cabbage goes to waste. So once the cabbages are all peeled up, this is what they look like. I was really happy with how these turned out. Some very high quality cabbage here. Cabbage is very inexpensive. It's one of the lower cost vegetables that you can get per pound. So you can get a lot of cabbage for a little bit. Now, when making sauerkraut, all you need is salt, cabbage, and a mason jar. Now, what kind of salt are you supposed to use? Well, we're going to be using a sea salt here, but you can also use a pink Himalayan salt. And don't worry if you don't have those salts, they're recommended. You can use any salt that you have. Just know that sea salt and Himalayan is recommended. Now I'm going to be teaching you how to cut the cabbage 3 different ways. We're going to be using a food processor, which is by far the easiest. You're going to use the slicer on the food processor and not the regular blade. The regular blade will chop it up, make it all mushy, but the slicer is going to cut it into these nice strips. And these strips are like these coleslaw strips, which is the consistency that we need for sauerkraut. When preparing your cabbage, make sure to peel off the outer leaves that you're not going to be using that might be damaged. When using the food processor, you're going to want to chop it up into manageable chunks. Now, I always cut my cabbage in half because what that does is it exposes the core. And then I can just cut out that core because it's really tough and we're not going to be using it in the sauerkraut. I'm going to set that aside and use that in a vegetable broth, or I just might throw it in the compost. These cores from my garden I definitely saved, and I ended up using it for a vegetable broth that was used for other recipes. Once those cores are removed, just chop the cabbage up into manageable pieces, but not too small to where we're not going to be able to get these strips out of them. And into the food processor we go. All right, looks like this buddy is full here. So let's take off the top and see what we got. You're gonna wanna grab a large mixing bowl because we're gonna be doing some smashing when it comes to this cabbage. Yep, this is what we're looking for. We're looking for a nice stringy consistency. If you find any chunks that are too big, you can remove them and make them smaller and just throw them right back into the pot. All right, now for the second method I'm gonna teach you, because not everybody's gonna have a food processor, it's just with a regular kitchen knife. That's it. It's actually really simple. Pull off any outer leaves that you're not going to be using, set those aside because we're going to use those later, and then just slice the cabbage into 1/4-inch strips. And then that's it. Cabbage, once you slice it into those 1/4-inch strips, they kind of fall apart into their self and end up being the right consistency that we're looking for. Alright, you see? Turned out just like the food processor. Food processor is quicker and not as messy, I think, but both ways work. Now, for the third way, I call this the bump shred. You gotta find the soft spot on the cabbage head and then just pick it up and drop it. It's hard to find, usually takes a couple drops before you find it. Try to feel around for a little soft spot on the top of the head. It's usually not at the very top, but kind of like on the forehead part of the head. And if you're lucky, you can get it. Let me try one more time. There it is. Got it. When you use this method, it chops it up perfectly every time. The only issue is it's a little messy and it gets all over the place. So use the food processor if you can, or the knife if you're not looking to have a big cleanup. All right, in with the salt, now comes the fun part. And by fun, I mean like you're gonna be spending some time really working and massaging this cabbage. The rule of thumb for the cabbage, in my experience, is per large head, you wanna use anywhere from 1.5 tablespoons of salt to 2 tablespoons, somewhere in there. I'm putting some on top and then I'm going to sprinkle some more on top and sort of fold it in. Once the salt is evenly distributed amongst the cabbage, then I'm going to take my time and massage it in and work all the liquid and fluids out of the cabbage. Because we're going to need those liquids, we're going to need that water to lacto ferment the cabbage. That's how the fermentation happens with sauerkraut. Is you have to use the liquid and keep the cabbage submerged underneath the liquid the whole time while it's fermenting in order to create that lacto-fermentation that creates the sauerkraut. It's going to take some time to massage this, but don't pulverize your cabbage because you still want it to have some sort of springiness to it. But massage it gently, pound it a little bit, and get all that water out of it. Now, when you're doing this, you might find some bubbles come up and it looks like soap, but that's normal. That's just the salt reacting with the water that's being released from the cabbage. Perfectly normal. And is what we're looking for. Maybe a little bit more water than that. But that's the idea. Once you've worked the cabbage and it's ready, the next step is to throw it into the mason jar. Now you can see I got some cabbage in the background right there. So I have to do some more cabbage to be able to fill it up into this large mason jar. So we're gonna jump into the next one and give you the recipe for the jalapeno one. The red cabbage and the green cabbage are both done this way. All it is just cabbage and salt. But for the spicy jalapeno one, we're gonna be using a jalapeno, some carrots, again, cabbage and salt, and also garlic. Throw that into your food processor on the shred this time, and then add that into your cabbage after you've already massaged it and worked all those good juices out of it. Go ahead and massage the new ingredients into that so that we have it evenly distributed. Like that. Next, grab your mason jar and fill it up. When you're filling up the mason jar, be sure to push the cabbage down because we want the liquid to rise to the top and keep the cabbage submerged underneath the liquid so that it can lacto ferment. Take some leaves of the cabbage. These are the outer leaves. You can use the outer leaves that you have on the store-bought cabbage, and then just push it down so that it holds the cabbage underneath the liquid. Then close your top and give it a little bit of a washing because it might be a little messy on the jar. All right, so that's it. We prepared the green cabbage with just salt. We've prepared the red cabbage with just salt, and then we showed you the spicy jalapeno sauerkraut. Grab some pans and put them in a spot in your house so that they can ferment for the next couple weeks. You're gonna wanna check on it every couple days though, because what happens is the lacto fermentation creates carbon dioxide, which is a gas. And what this gas does is it builds pressure into those bottles. And here you can see what it's like. You can see how active it is. When you see those bubbles going in the jar, you know that some fermentation is happening. So every couple days, to release the pressure that's being built up in these bottles, is you have to do what's called burping them. And all the burping is by opening the top, letting the gas escape, and then closing the top back up again. And you also might want to push down on your cabbage so that sometimes the gases will lift the cabbage up out of the water, but you want to make sure to keep it submerged. Now, how long should you ferment? That's a good question. It's really up to you and your taste. Now, some people ferment for only 4 days, 1 week. I personally like to ferment for a couple weeks, 2 weeks, and then I'll leave it out even longer. For me, the longer it ferments, the better it tastes. I have fermented sauerkraut for up to 2 months, but it usually doesn't last that long because once I start diving into it and I know it's ready, I end up eating the whole thing. Well, that's it. That's how you make sauerkraut. I hope you guys found this video informative. And if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to this channel so that we can bring you more videos and hit that notification. Take care. We'll see you in the next one.